Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which...
The mic working?
Is it working? Okay. Start over again. The New Jersey Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Belvidere Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted with the Star Ledger and Express Times and submitted to the town clerk of the town of Belvidere on January 14th, 2021. Due to COVID-19, masks will be required at this meeting when proper social distancing cannot be maintained. Board members will be able to participate in the meeting virtually via conference call, and the meeting will be live streamed for members of the public that do not wish to attend in person. Public not in attendance can email comments to be read during public participation to rtjalma@belvideresd.org. Public comment on agenda items needs to be received by 7 p.m. and have public participation number 1 in the subject line. Public comment that is not related to agenda items needs to be received by 7:20 p.m. and have public participation number 2 in the subject line of the email. Can I get a resolution, a motion and a second pursuant to bylaw 9310 to suspend certain meeting procedures as described in the notice of meeting, specifically to authorize board members to participate in the meeting virtually via conference call if desired? Motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. Time for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance.
Flag.
United States of America.
Public.
God. Liberty, justice for all. Roll call, Shell.
Mr. Blum?
Here.
Mrs. Costantino?
Here.
Dr. Zuppeth?
Here.
Mrs. Duckworth?
Virtual there.
Melissa, can you hear?
Mr. Labar?
Yep, here.
Mrs. Powell?
Here.
Mrs. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Steppen?
Here.
Mr. Ty?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here. Okay, it's time in our meeting for public participation. Does anybody in the audience have any public participation? No? Okay, Shell, do you have any emails?
I do. I have two that I guess are related to the agenda in some way, so I'll start with those.
Yeah, they're related to the agenda. Go ahead.
The first is from Victoria French. I'm a parent of a severely autistic little boy. This whole issue where the aides aren't being given the choice of part or full-time is bizarre to me. As an adult who had an aide in their classroom for most of their school years, I have an inside view of what it's like to have the comfort of an aide in the class. I also saw what it was like for the kids with a one-on-one aide. In the last 12 years since I graduated high school, I'm sure the job description hasn't gotten any shorter. After all, we have added wiping a tush to the list for my son. The aides that I always saw as a kid taught me so much, and I'm very thankful for them. A short look into everything they taught me. They taught me about how to care for a special kid and how there are other ways to look at things. Sometimes a tough problem needs a simple solution. They taught me to never give up and that it's important to take a moment to look at the other side. There is a kind, gentle way to life, and the faster you learn it, the further you go. A meltdown can be dismantled with a calm tone and a gentle hand on the arm. Never give up and always keep your head up. You can look tough on the outside, but everyone has a marshmallow side to them. No matter what, keep your sense of humor, and it can keep you afloat during tough times. I watched the aides in the classes and their kids growing up and had a popcorn aide for most of my classes. In the high school, I met my husband. The class we had together had an aide in it, and I wonder why he also feels so strongly about this as well. As someone who can see the parent side and has felt the lifelong impact of having an aide in my classes and all they can teach you, leave it to the aides. If working 65% works for them and their kids, that's fine. If you have a child like mine where the world would end and productivity would drop, put them at 100% and give them the choice for what is right for them. I know my son would go downhill without his ISA all day. A switch of aide, even on a routine, would be disruptive. I have seen the change in my son from September until now, and the progress is huge. Waylon held hands with another little boy at the beginning of May, and he won't even hold his sister's hand. Waylon gives me pretty consistent S and U's answers, and he pretty consistently calls Miss Melissa by her name he gave her of Issa. I feel confident every morning when I drop off Waylon, knowing his Issa will be there for him. I have only ever left Waylon with 2 people that weren't grandparents, and Melissa is one of them. I also know if you mess with this Issa, there's a good chance we will lose all progress he has made. I've seen it, and it's not pretty. I know when Melissa is out, Waylon may be a complete nightmare, but I know they try and that he is safe with the other aides. These are just a few things we have noticed. Let's not joke. I know Waylon is a monster when Melissa isn't there, and we definitely feel it at home too. He gets to the point where I think it's just better to keep him home than to send him when she's out. When Waylon had to stay home for 2 weeks for COVID, I had to ask Melissa to join the virtual class just to be there for him to see. Thank you, Melissa, and whoever granted permission. That really calmed him down and regrounded him and made him more manageable. It really isn't easy being a special needs mom. Thank you to his class teacher and the other aides, Melissa, and the therapist for all your hard work on my son. I know he isn't an easy student, but he has come such a long way in such a short time. I never thought I'd see the little boy I had before COVID again. With all of them there full-time next year, I feel more confident sending both of my kids, knowing that these women will put in so much hard work to change these little lives. School is scary enough whether you are normal or special, and aid adds a level of comfort, and they do so much. There's nothing more unsettling than coming back from summer break and most of the adult faces have changed. Those familiar faces from last year really ease the anxiety of school. The kids changing is a given, but chances are you've already seen next year's teachers and aides in the hall already, and it really does ease a lot of anxiety. A teacher does so much to make the class happen, and an aide makes it run smoother, helps where needed, does whatever is necessary, explains things further, and doesn't make you ask in front of the whole class. They take you to the bathroom and to the nurse. They make a school run smoother and do so much to help get an education. Let's let the aides choose what works. Let the aides choose what works for them and their kids. Sincerely, Vicki French. The next one is from Katya Dow. Hello, I'd like to voice my concerns about cutting the hours for aides at Belvidere Elementary School. My daughter is in 3rd grade and I'm a Belvidere High School alumni. This is a time when kids need and are going to need more help than ever. I know my children who feel as though they truly will not be able to catch up due to the multitude of hats that the teachers are currently wearing. This response is not going to do anything but worsen that feeling and potentially make more children feel the pressure of falling behind. I would like to be clear that I strongly do not agree with the vote to keep the aides part-time. They need to be full-time, period. I apologize for not being able to attend the meeting in person tonight, but I hope that my message comes across clearly. Do not fail our children. Bring the aides back to full-time. Thank you for your time. Catch it down.
Who was the writer of that, please?
It's Katya Dow.
Katya Dow.
The other one I have is for unrelated to the agenda.
All right, so we'll close public participation. We're going to do the presentation of Scholar Athletes next. Is that the plan? All right, Ed, it's all yours.
Things that have happening, thank you. Things have been happening in the years past because of COVID. We would have a top 10 dinner. So we haven't had that last year. We're not having that again this year. So we kind of put something together for the kids on June 8th where we're going to have senior NHS members. We're going to have a quick dinner for them and recognize them. Back here, put them on the spot a little bit, ask a couple questions.
It certainly isn't you.
Congratulations, guys, and congratulations to all the Scholar athletes, even the ones that couldn't attend this evening. Are we going to do correspondence, Shell, or are we going to?
We can.
All right, to correspondence.
Y'all would like to hear me talk?
I gave you a break. I threw the Scholar
Thank
athletes
you.
in first.
The first letter I have is from Stephanie Warbutz. I recently received my pension confirmation letter, so at this time, I'm submitting my formal letter of resignation due to my retirement as of July 1, 2021. It has been a pleasure working for the Belvidere Board of Education and the Belvidere community. Best regards, Stephanie Warbutz. The next one is from Lisa Cundiff. As a follow-up to my previous letter, and after receiving my confirmation from the pension department, I am submitting my letter of resignation as teacher's aide effective June 30th, 2021, due to my retirement. This was not a decision that was made lightly or without much sadness. Unfortunately, I felt like the current climate left me with no other choice if I wanted to secure my benefits upon retirement. I would like to thank Belvidere and all of the wonderful staff members who have helped make my 25 years a real pleasure. Most of all, I thank the years of children who have enriched my life in so many ways. Thank you. The next one is from Laura Svensson. I will be resigning from my position as school counselor effective June 30th because I have opportunities that will be taking me out of state and I will be moving to Connecticut this summer. I sincerely appreciate the time I have spent at Belvidere High School. It has been a pleasure working with such a supportive administration and gaining such excellent experience. In previous years, the counselors have been, she was saying she'd like to still have the opportunity to do some of the summer work to catch up. And says, thank you for your continued support for a fantastic 5 years. I will forever be grateful for BHS and the opportunities and experience it has provided me. The next is from Courtney Kopf. Please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as Belvidere High School biological science teacher. My last day of employment will be June 30th, 2021. I thank you and the entire administrative team for the opportunity to have worked with the most incredible student body, staff, and school community over the last 7 years. It has not been an easy decision to leave the classroom or the Belvidere School District, but I have found a new position that will allow me to take my career in a new direction. I will forever cherish my time here. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help with the transition of a new hire when the time comes. The next is from Liz Dwyer. Please accept this letter as notice of my resignation from my position as art teacher at Belvidere Elementary and Middle School. My last day of employment will be June 16th, 2021. I am grateful to Mr. Karabinas and you for having given me the opportunity to teach what I love over the past 2 years. At this point in time, I've decided to pursue my own small art business, which will give me flexibility to also care for my young children. I will truly miss teaching all of my wonderful students and the Belvidere school community. I'm happy to assist in any way possible during this transition. Thank you again for this opportunity. I wish you all the very best.
All right, some good people are retiring, some long-term employees, and we'll surely miss all of them. At this time, we're going to go into an executive session to discuss HIB matters. The matters discussed will be disclosed to the public when the reasons for confidentiality no longer exist. Can I get a motion and a second for exec session?
Motion.
Second. I got two motions. All right, will probably be 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops, I would think. Won't be long. And obviously, we're going to take action when we come out. We have a whole agenda to take action on. Okay, so we're back from executive session. So can I get a motion and a second for personnel items on the agenda 1 through 17?
Motion.
Second, somebody? Okay, discussion, questions. Chris is here, so questions for Chris?
I just have a question in reference to the number 8. The aids that were on the first agenda, I'm just confused with everything that's gone on with the aids. These are the aids that were on the first agenda that we were originally going to approve.
Correct.
And then the last meeting was, because these are 100%. I know Chris sent out an explanation, but it still didn't make it clear.
Chris, you want to handle that?
Can you just repeat the question? I couldn't hear Mrs. Williams all that well.
I'm questioning, these are the aids that we approved in the first meeting, but then, I'm just confused.
No, these are
Where
the
we
aids
voting
that
on
have
this?
not. These are the aids that have been approved that have not been approved at all. So the first meeting back on the 28th, remember we tabled. The last meeting we approved only the part-time aids.
Okay.
So that's why they're back on. Hopefully with a full board and everybody has an opportunity to vote, we can settle the situation.
Any other questions for
Marion,
Chris?
which of the aides on number 8 were part-time last year that are being increased to full-time?
You hear that, Chris?
When Doc says last year, does he mean this current year or the previous year?
Current school year.
Current school year. If you're talking to your mic, Doc, he can hear you.
They are all full-time aides this year, correct, Mr. Karabinas?
That's incorrect.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Okay.
In number 8, the aides that are currently
Oh, it's
part-time,
65%. I'm sorry. I'm thinking because we're only in 65%.
it's
So
Tracy,
technically, they're all 65%, Doc, with the exception of, I believe it's Maureen Burns, Shonda Collum, Ed, and not even, those two, correct? Claire Brownstein.
I have a question.
Shoot.
I'm also confused. Last meeting, we voted for the part-time aides only, but certain board members voted no to the full-time aides, and we didn't have the quorum. So if we were only voting on part-time aides, why did we vote on the full-time aides at the last meeting? And this has never happened before, where all of a sudden the next meeting, we're now at 100%.
So to clarify, at the last meeting, we needed 7, we still would have needed the majority of the board, so 7 of 12 is the majority for it to pass. Whether we had 7 or we had 12, as long as we had a quorum. 8 voted in favor of the part-time aides, which caused that to pass. Only 6 voted in favor of the full-time aides, which caused it to fail. So I felt that it was prudent to once again have them on there, the full-time aides, with the hope, and it's come to fruition that the full board would be here to vote on it.
Okay, so the decision was made in between last board meeting and this board meeting, despite the vote to increase the aides to full-time, now that everybody's here. Okay.
We didn't vote
just
to
would have
increase the aides to full-time. That motion failed at the last meeting.
So if it failed, then usually it's a done deal. So I'm just confused why it's on here now, and I'm not against it. I voted yes for the full-time aides. I'm just confused what happened in between last meeting and this meeting, and why as vice president of the board, I wasn't even notified about any change like this. This came as a shock to me when I saw the agenda.
There's,
Well, you certainly
the
can reach
motion
out
that's
to
on
me.
there is the same motion
Yeah.
that was on the special meeting agenda. There's no change in the full-time aides from there. There is a change from the April 28th meeting. But then we held the special meeting. This is the same exact full-time aides that were on that agenda. Does that make sense? And because the motion did not carry at the last time, and we need to hire some aides,
Well, I understand we got this. I don't think a lot of the whole process made sense, to be honest. And we've never, in the 2.5 years I've been on the board, we've never had this process before. So I don't know what happened, but anyway, I'm going to move on. I'm going to vote yes to the full-time aides. I just, again,
Your mic,
Shocked.
Catherine.
For voting purposes, I need to know whether these are the ones that are needed and requested at 100% for the education of the students that they'll be taking care of, not ones that are being added on so that we have extra in case we need them, because that was the dilemma I was at.
Now, as I said at the last meeting, these are aids that we need for the educational program for both personal and for classroom.
Okay.
Any other questions for Chris?
On numbers 10 and 11, the summer instructors were asking for about $40,000 for that. Where is that money being transferred from?
The money is coming from our grant stock that we have been applying for through all of the, some of it through the stimulus money and other money through the state that is designed to, I guess, help catch the students up from the missing education over the last really 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
18,000 of it is budgeted. We had budgeted for the program, and then, like Chris just said, that there's a $25,000 learning loss or learning acceleration grant that was part of the ESSER 2 that we just submitted for.
Any other questions? No?
yeah, I have one question. I don't remember, did we decide, who decided on the $50 an hour? I thought it was a different number. Did that change as well from the finance meeting? Or has it always been 50? I don't recall that
No, I
number.
believe it's always been, Shelley, did you answer that?
It's been 50 through the budget process. That was what we were going
Right.
to offer for the program.
I just didn't remember that number. I thought I would have remembered that. Okay.
Any other questions?
On
Comments?
number 16, does approve seasonal helpers, are we adding to the ones that are on the agenda? It's just an addition, not replacing them?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's both 16s, both 11s, and both 10s. Any other questions? All right, Shel, roll call.
Mr. Blum?
Yes.
Mrs. Costantino?
Yes, abstain from 6.
Say 6.
Yes.
Dr. Zuppeth?
Yes.
Mrs. Duckworth?
I say yes, and I have to abstain from number 17.
Mr. Labar?
Yes to all, abstain. 11, Beth Fran.
Mrs. Pell?
Yes.
Mrs. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Steffen?
Yes to all but 8, no on 8.
Mr. Ty?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Okay, can I get a motion and a second for agenda items on education 18 Now, just bear with me, 18 through 23, and there's no add-ons. 18 through 23.
Motion.
Second, somebody?
Second.
Questions, comments?
I have a question on number 23.
Sure.
In fact, Shelley, you may be able to answer this. What is our average cost to educate an IEP student yearly?
Average overall?
Just an average per student. I mean, my math says it's around $35,000.
I would say it could definitely be in that range.
We average $30,000. Why are we accepting a kid from White for 30, a kid from Hope for 30, a kid from Harmony for 30, and then another kid from Harmony for 35? Is that 30 in addition to the state and federal aid that we're going to get? Or, I mean, where's the rest of that money coming from?
This is what so this tuition works basically the exact same way that our regular tuition does. So what happens is we bill them based upon an estimate of what will be the balance for that program, and then in 2 years it's trued up to the actual. So if the actual cost of the program is $32,000, then those districts will pay us back the $2,000, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So we go on what the costs have been, in the past. But in a class like, say, the MD program maybe only has 14 kids, and then maybe you only have 10 the next year, or you have 18. That's a huge flux. So we stay pretty consistent around 35,000. And the BD program especially, is only having a few kids in it, that's a new cost. We're not really sure which way it's going to go.
Yes,
But it is trued up, so it will be fair across the board.
So it will be adjusted at the end of the year based on an average cost per student?
Yep, it's a certified tuition rate through the Department of Education. So when we get the certified rate, that's when we adjust either up or down.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Can I get a motion and a second for business items 24 through 35? Motion? Second?
Second.
Questions, comments? 24 through 35.
I have a question on 26. Is there any, this is just the submission of a plan that none of us have seen yet?
This
And-
plan was emailed out last week so that everybody could review it.
Yeah, I wanted it presented, only because looking at those papers and trying to figure out where this money is going to actually be spent, and we can read it, Shelley, and, but to know that where our priorities are and what's going to get implemented, that's what I'm really looking
Right,
more
so the
for.
long-range facility plan itself, that just tells us, here's almost like it's a wish list in a way, but it's also like a just-in-case list in a way of things that may or may not be needed or wanted over the next 5 years. And that just gives us the ability then with the Department of Education to say, yep, you put in for it, it's on your list, you can go ahead and do it. The next biggest step of what we're wanting to do, and what the architects have said, as soon as they submit the LRFP, then they're going to give us something that they call the roadmap. That's going to be more of a useful planning document for us that says, here's what the priorities seem to be. I think it's like a green light, yellow light, red light type system. From there, our plan is to definitely at least start with the facilities/finance committee and/or the whole board and go through what does the board now really want to do, knowing that probably any of the projects that are on the LRFP, the first that they'll be able to be looked at is not until the summer of '22 at the very earliest, because we already did the 21-22 budget. So we anticipate probably, I don't know, over the next couple of months, that we'll really now have to nail down what direction does the board want to go on with the projects and the results of this facility audit that we just had done. But the LRFP itself is not the driving document.
So the LRFP is just a list of all the projects we have internally that we could do at some point, should we choose to? And that's this list. that we-
Potentially could happen over the next 5 years. And I don't know if you got a chance to glance at it and you look at the dollar magnitude of it.
Yeah.
There's we'll be lucky if we can do a couple few of them.
21 million for the high school and 4 million for the elementary school.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
So this is
extensive.
this is just a list, so you're not approving any actual
We're not
projects.
approving any of those projects at all. We're just saying,
Fun to clarify.
yes, you can do the electronic upload to the state to put that in, and that's just one of the criteria that if we want to do a project, the state has to already have it in this LRFP document.
We would then vote on projects later on. That's what I want to make sure.
Right, we don't typically vote on projects, but I think the discussion of the board has been to at least have probably a board level discussion as to how we want to prioritize and how we want to move forward and what direction it is. So I think that's our next plan is.
These
Yeah.
are big ticket items. I don't
They're
think we could
huge.
just
So
be
they're going to be
focused on in
multi-year.
finance,
Right.
not
I
in
agree.
finance. I don't know much about any of them, so.
Yeah, there's probably going to have to be a
That
full
we'll
board
need to,
discussion.
Yeah.
we're going to need to really be saving in the capital reserve, et cetera, to get, to complete most any. So I think that was the next discussion. We're at least going to start with the Finance Facilities Committee. Or if you want, we can schedule a special meeting for the whole board to discuss that over the summer. That just says, we're going to now look at this list. We're going to get this, roadmap from the architects and try to come to a consensus of what way do we want to plan. And I think I'm going to jump a little, Mr. Blum. We do now have the ESSER 3 funds that are coming out, which I believe they call it ARP, which Mr. Blum had given a handout that I passed out to everyone. There is funding there that we do need to look at and decide, how are we going to tie that into our facilities plans, or if it's going to be towards another educational plan, et cetera. But before we can really file that grant, we need to have an internal plan of what are we really going to do.
And when do we expect to get that roadmap? Does that happen?
They said after they submit the LRFP, which they can't submit until we
Right, approve it.
give them the approval to do so. I don't know if it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'm not sure. But after is when we'll get the roadmap. So the email I had to put out is that we could have held a meeting tonight to discuss it before the vote, but without the roadmap, the one response I got said, well, we might as well wait till we get something that's a little more prioritized than the LRFP, knowing that that's kind of like a broad view of what we could do.
Could you tell me how the LRFP was, how did that come about? What was the process?
The finance committee had said, let's do an RFP to some architects to hire someone to do a complete facility audit of all 3 of our buildings and our grounds, which we did, and then we hired as a board Brett Somgen Architects. They came in, they were here several times, several site visits to evaluate, like I said, all 3 of our buildings, the grounds, et cetera, and then they created lists of things that were in excellent, good, fair, poor condition. From there, we starred ones that had any chance of happening over the next 5 years. That's what we put into the LRFP. And now we're going to get the roadmap, which will hopefully give us a little more prioritized information as to what our real concerns and needs are for the building. And it came about, and anybody can correct me if they feel this is incorrect, but we've been discussing athletic fields by request several times, and then it became a question of, well, before we decide any way we're going to do anything on the athletic fields, maybe we should check, is there any other priorities that would trump that? So they said, let's hire this firm to see if there's anything else that glaringly is above doing any athletic field repairs or upgrades, so that we know how best we should spend money that we're saving in our capital reserve.
Thank you.
Fair?
The LRFP doesn't prioritize like they're saying, so I think that's really the issue, is it's just a list of expenditures, but there's no actual, and the roadmap is
And it's
supposed-
duplicative.
Yeah. So it doesn't prioritize what comes first, what comes
Correct.
shocking.
Yes. And the numbers that are in there, it should be noted too, that they seem to be grossly overstated for the costs right now, but that's because they have to put in a cost that could be the cost averaged over the next 5 years, because it's a 5-year plan. So they shouldn't be the costs of it doing it today. They still seem quite high even for that. But yeah, it's quite a document to read, but besides the need to do it for the DOE, it's not a document that, we use very often.
Just a normal amount of a LRF, I mean, as far as this whole thing, long-range facility plan, is this normal, this sort of cost? That districts typically have this much wear and tear, or the facilities have not been addressed for so many years?
I actually, and maybe we will have the architect come to, at least to the facilities committee, but if she said it once, she said it 10 times, how wonderfully maintained our facilities are, how some of our classrooms and some of our elective areas are well-suited to be upgraded and worked on, and how other districts would die to have some of the stuff that we have here, and that we're really in excellent shape. So I know when you look at the numbers, and there's, $22 million, of things on the LRFP, that we're actually doing really well, and she couldn't have commended the maintenance crew and everything more. So it was very nice to hear.
Yeah, for the maintenance crew.
Any other questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're at the point for continuing business. Chris, do you have anything for continuing business?
No, I just have a couple of things for new business, so if there's nobody else for continuing, I'll be ready with new business.
The only thing I have for continuing is that we're going to have the meeting on 6/9. I sent everybody out an email. There's a few agenda items plus the training/workshop. Anybody else have continuing business?
I have a question about the foundation. Have we thought about that?
Where are we? Chris, that's for you.
I couldn't hear Mrs. Webb.
Foundation.
The foundation.
We're still working on it. I need more direction from the board as to which way we want to go with that, who's going to run it. I know we've reached out to a few people and we haven't got much response at this point, so.
Everybody sees the costs that are involved.
Yeah.
And districts have seen a lot of money that comes out from alumni and local areas, and we can't do certain things unless we start to recruit some of ways other districts have gotten money to do the things that we need to do. So I think that we need to make a concerted effort to try to do that.
Could we maybe form a committee, Chris, to get this moving off the dime?
Yeah, so the question has always been, who's going to be driving the foundation? Is it going to be administration, the board, or community? I'd be happy to put a committee together to start gathering that, but I just would like a little bit of direction of what the board's expectation is from the administration or the board itself.
Anybody have any thoughts?
Which we can do in a committee. We can certainly do that in a committee.
Yeah, I think probably our best bet is to put a committee together and discuss it there.
All right, I'll put out an email to everyone to put the ad hoc committee together and see who's interested.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Bob.
I have a topic that I'd like to shed some light on.
Bob, can you talk in the microphone?
I think I am, aren't I?
I got to pull it closer, Bob.
I'd like to shed some light on an article I read in the newspaper on Sunday. It was written by Marie Bliston, who is president of the New Jersey Education Association. The title of her article is NJEA, Let's Spend That Extra $3.7 billion for Schools Wisely. And it goes on to say, thanks to the American Rescue Plan Act signed by President Joe Biden on March the 11th, New Jersey will receive more than $3.7 billion in federal funding to support education. Of that amount, nearly $2.5 billion is slated to go directly to school districts to address the educational, health and safety, and social emotional needs of students. We must seize this opportunity for transformational investment in our students' present and future success. It then goes on to say, there's one thing that every district in common through a federal mandate to engage we have to engage local stakeholders. This requires us to engage local stakeholders, including parents, community members, and local education associations in discussing on how to best invest these new resources to meet the needs of each community's students. And that collaboration cannot be just for show. It needs to be authentic engagement with the people who know best what their students need to reset and thrive. And she goes on to say that it's important that we start now in the summertime to get this in place for start of school in September. So I just wanted to bring this to light to the interested parties.
Thanks, Bob.
If I can piggyback on that, 'cause I think it actually goes to what I wanted to mention in new business. I was going to talk about our restart plan that I've certainly emailed the board a couple of times on, and the timeliness of it. We do have to have that submitted, as I said, by June 24th. We did just get it Monday afternoon. It came in very late in the day on Monday. The good news is that it's not a checklist and a long one, as we were previously told. The bad news is it's still a pretty lengthy document. With that, as we can do the initial submission, but I think this goes along with what Mr. Blum is saying, we're going to, at some point over the summer, have to bring back our restart committee, as we had last year, to talk about where some of the money will go and what some of the expenditures will be. So when I submit the plan, and I will have it to the board next Friday, not this Friday, next week, you'll be able to see it's a generic plan in the sense of it's very similar to what we had last year, but there are points where we're going to have to start looking at where we're going to expend some of the money that we're getting. We have a relatively good idea. I think Shelley knows the exact number, but we're getting just under $300,000 in that funding. I think it was around 290, if I recall. Shelley, you can give a better number. So that's something we're going to discuss with the restart committee as we get through the summer. So when you see the initial plan will be worked on with the administration and our pandemic response team, but then we'll bring it to the overall restart committee during the summer. And we can modify it as much as we want prior to November, when we actually submit for the funds.
The amount that we've been awarded is $297,674. That's for the ARP ESSER 3 funds. And it's our understanding that along with this restart plan, the final grant is due, like Chris said, in November.
Okay. Well, any other continuing business?
I have something. The grant writer, I've been asking this several meetings, and I do know there was some confusion as to there being a grant for the new field that we had discussed putting in. To my knowledge, there was no grant. We were going to withdraw $300,000 to $400,000 from our maintenance reserve accounts, and then finance $750,000 or $750,000 to put the field in. So, to my knowledge, and why I was not for putting the field in right away, was because of the cost and the debt that we would incur. To my knowledge, there is no grant. If there is a grant, what are we doing about the grant, hiring a grant writer so that we can figure these things out?
I believe we budgeted for the grant writer again this year at halftime, and we'll be looking to advertise that position over the summer.
I don't know that there was a grant, though, for the field, right, Chris? Chris,
Repeat your question, Marion. I didn't
was
hear.
there ever, I don't recall ever a grant for the field, though. We talked about possibly the foundation getting donations for it.
I think we've talked about it in a couple different areas, whether it was the foundation or it was a grant writer. I think it could probably be covered across both of those.
Okay.
I know Doc has mentioned in the past certain bigger corporations have given, I think Allentown schools or Easton schools have gotten grants, whether it was, from some of the bigger industries. So we can look at it that way too. It could also look at it through the foundation.
Okay.
I also have something else. I would like to address the public on a specific conflict that has arisen on the board. Have had a few questions brought to my attention that I would like to address. We have a board policy that states it is not a conflict of interest if merely by reason of his or her participation in any matter voted upon the board, a board member accrues material or monetary gain that is no greater than the gain that could reasonably be expected to accrue to any other member of the member's business, profession, occupation, or group. I do own an accounting practice in the town of Belvidere. I do have a client that works in the school district. I was open and honest about this conflict. I abstained when necessary. The conflict was then pursued by the board or the administration or in combination of the two. We spent taxpayer dollars to have the attorney pursue this and write a letter to the state in which at the time I said okay to, not knowing that this policy was on. I'm just not sure why we have continued to pursue the conflict, especially when it doesn't seem like we're pursuing other conflicts on this board. Feels like as though I'm being targeted and the same rules are not applying to all members of the board. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any other conflicts that have been pursued for any members on the board who either currently have a business or have had a business in the past. To my knowledge, it hasn't happened in the 2.5 years I've been on the board, so I don't know if it has or hasn't. I do agree that we have a cultural issue on the board because the same rules are not applying to everyone. And after the initial saying that I did have a conflict and I couldn't be on negotiations, the board and or the administration decided to pursue if I would be then conflicted with the superintendent. I completed the superintendent evaluation fairly, spent a lot of time on it, to be told yesterday that I can no longer participate in it. And my question would be, how on earth did you get the results of that so fast the day before this meeting when it took 2.5 months last time to get a result from the Ethics Commission at the state? But this time it took under 2 weeks and it coincidentally came in the day before this meeting. So now I am conflicted and cannot participate in the executive session tonight to evaluate that. I do feel I've been targeted, like I said before, and I feel that other board members that are here listening to this should speak up for what is right. And whether they agree with specific things or not, it should be fair to every board member here. And anyone that stays silent about this, it will just happen to somebody else, and it will happen again. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll add to that, if I may.
Sure.
So, Mrs. Pell has an accounting business in town. And I'm sorry, Mr. Blum. Mr. Blum also has an accounting business in town. I've not heard anything about Mr. Blum being conflicted. Marianne, in 2018, your daughter, who's a teacher, was living with you. You didn't recuse yourself, and you were involved in the superintendent's evaluation. I've gone through...
My daughter...
Excuse me, let me finish, please. I've gone through the minutes. You didn't excuse yourself. Okay, you participated in the superintendent's evaluations, and you participated in negotiations, which is a conflict of interest.
I did not participate in negotiations, and my daughter does not work for the school district and never did.
She
Hence, I
is
was
involved in the NJEA.
She
is a member of the NJEA.
Per NJSBA. If at that time, my daughter was living in my home, I could not participate in negotiations and did not. I could participate in the superintendent's evaluation because she did not work for him. They just changed the rule.
She's a member of the same statewide
You can say what you want, Andy. I'm going by what the rules are, the NJSBA
Well, you don't
rules.
go by the rules. You go by the rules when it applies to certain people on this board.
I go
For the
by-
rest of the board, excuse me, let me finish. You managed to cut me off and adjourn the meeting last time, but not this time, okay? You go by the rules when it suits you. When it doesn't suit you, or when someone disagrees with you, you manage to make up rules to make them think that.
I'm sorry, it's
You don't think?
I know,
I've watched it, man. I've been on this board since October, and I've
Andy,
watched
it's
it happen
comical.
over and over again.
Give me one instant where I made up one rule. Give me one instant where I made up one rule.
No one can have an opinion on this board.
Decorum,
Yeah, I
please.
agree that there's no reason to raise your voice, and
I apologize. I'm out of line.
I get it, but my question to Catherine is, did you, I don't know how to put this, when you said that you were conflicted, and questioned, I should say, that you were conflicted, what was the answer that you got?
They weren't sure.
They weren't sure, and then they reflected back to our attorney.
Correct.
All right, so,
It was pursued, a letter went out to the state 3 or 4 days after the reorganization meeting in January.
okay, because you were on the negotiations committee.
That is correct.
Okay, and your client is someone that actually works in the school district?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Blum, do you have anyone that works in the school district in your,
No.
no? There's the difference.
Never have. For a while, never have. Because
Never have.
This is all new to me.
Never have.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I still do not understand. I understand the negotiations piece for sure, and I think that Catherine was upfront, and I think that was very ethical of her to come out and say that to begin with. Then it was gone, and then all of a sudden it came back a couple days after the reorganization meeting, and then all of a sudden it has to do with superintendent evaluation. I don't see what the superintendent evaluation has to do with her conflict with negotiations. However, my concern right now is as a board member, other than through Catherine, I didn't know any of this was going on. So all these conversations with the lawyer and the letters that were being written and the investigation with the state, the rest of the board didn't know about. So I have an issue with billable hours when we don't even know what's going on. And that's an issue for me.
It was a personal matter for Catherine. She was free to tell anybody at any time what was going on. She chose not to.
But who decided to pursue it? It wasn't.
She came to me and said, I'm conflicted. I went to the attorney who said, oh my God, we need to pursue this. And that's what set the ball in motion.
Can I answer Colleen's question?
Sure.
Because you asked a question about Mr. Blum having a current client. The ruling from the state says that you don't even necessarily have to have a current client in order to be conflicted. Just have a business in town and be perceived as financially or monetarily gaining from any sort of business. So that's what came back. It's not just whether or not you have a client in the district currently or not.
I think you're wrong. I think it's
No, verbatim, Marianne. Her continued provision of accounting services in the district creates a justifiable impression that the public trust is being violated. Word for word from the opinion.
You want to address any of this?
Usually I'm loud, but, I just want to say this very sincerely, that the purpose of getting an advisory opinion from the School Ethics Commission is primarily to protect the board, and particularly, very sincerely, to protect the board member in question. When an issue is raised, an advisory opinion is not punitive in any way, it's not an ethics charge in any way, it's asking for advice from the School Ethics Commission as to whether something may be a conflict. And so that's all that was pursued. It was a question to them. They came back and said there was a conflict, and I think it's pretty clear from there were basically two advisory opinions. The one is the original one saying there was a conflict, and the second one is a clarification just confirming that the conflict would extend to the superintendent's evaluation and anything, any employment issues related to the superintendent. And I think, just from reading the two opinions, it's very clear that it does relate largely to the fact that there is a client in the district, which, again, the board member has been very upfront and honest about that there is a client in the district. So in order to protect her from possibly getting into a situation where she could be subjecting herself to an ethics violation, it was important to get the Ethics Commission to give us advice and tell us, is this a conflict, first of all? And second of all, to what extent does it apply? Is it only to negotiations, or does it apply also to the superintendent's evaluation? And they came back, and it's true that this decision it coincidentally came out yesterday. It's just a matter of timing. They meet only once a month, the Ethics Commission. Their meeting for May, I think it's usually the fourth Tuesday of the month. Their meeting for May happened to be, I think, yesterday, and that's when the decision came in. So that's just a question of timing. It just so happened when they the request went in a couple of weeks ago, they decided it yesterday, and that's why it came out then. So again, there's really nothing negative about this. The board member was upfront and honest about the fact that she has. It's not just that she has a business in town; it's that she has a client who actually works for the district, and so that we referred it to the Ethics Commission, and the Ethics Commission has advised us that is in fact a conflict, and further they've advised us that conflict would extend to any matters involving that particular employee, as well as to negotiations and to the superintendent's evaluation. So it's good to have that roadmap going forward, because otherwise if the board member inadvertently participated in some of these things that they shouldn't, the board member could be subject to actually having ethics charges filed, which would be a negative thing. And obviously no one would want that to happen.
Just to be clear, if someone that works for the district walks into Mr. Blum's office tomorrow and says, here, I want you to do my taxes, Mr. Blum is now conflicted out. If somebody tells Dr. Zopoff, that they'd like to rent one of his properties that works in the district, that's Mr. Zopoff out.
Well, first of all, if somebody just comes in and says, I would like you to do something, that wouldn't create a conflict.
It's discrimination for him to say
no. No, it wouldn't create a conflict. I would say if any of the other board members had a business in which they were, had a client that worked for the district, then that would potentially be a conflict. Obviously, every fact is different. A professional relationship in a professional may be different than if someone, for instance, has a coffee shop and someone walked in and bought a cup of coffee. That probably would not create a conflict. So, there's all different levels. On the other hand, if somebody else had an accounting firm, for instance, and then had a client that worked for the district, then that may very well also create a conflict.
We're a 1 mile square town. There's 2 accountants. They're both sitting on this board.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the odds that neither of them are going to have a district employee that they do taxes for?
Well, they have to be careful. They have to be careful because if they do, then they are they would have the potential that there could be an ethics situation, and so they would be prudent to look into it, perhaps consult with the board attorney, or if necessary, seek an advisory opinion from the Ethics Commission, just to be clear as to what they could and can't do.
And I'll ask, in the 20 or 30 years that some of the people that are on this board have been on the board, has anybody ever gotten in trouble for a situation just like that?
I haven't been here that long, I can't answer it.
15 years.
Maybe 10 I can answer. I don't recall, no.
Mr. Zepith, you've been on the board for 30 years. Has this ever happened before?
He hasn't been on the board for 30 years.
Oh.
He's been on less than me.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Obviously, you were reached out to look into this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Was the subject the fact of the matter regarding Mr. Karuba's review? Yes?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Was the topic looked into because of his review? There was a conflict with his review?
No, the original letter that went in, I think it may have been January, the original letter went in, was brought about specifically about a negotiations issue. But in that initial letter, and I've dealt with ethics issues before and familiar with a lot of the ethics issues. In that initial letter to the School Ethics Commission, we asked, please advise if there's any conflict with respect to participation in negotiations, participation in the superintendent's review, evaluation. It was right in the initial letter. It was all the possible conflict. The Ethics Commission, when they issued their initial decision, referenced all those questions we asked, including that one, but only answered a couple of them. They left a couple kind of hanging. So then a question was asked of me later whether it would apply to the superintendent's evaluation. I gave the opinion that I thought it would, based on my reading of the opinion, but it was requested that we get something more definitive. In fact, at the last board meeting, I was at the last board meeting, and it came up, and someone mentioned, I think the board president mentioned, that in my opinion it was a conflict, but that wasn't, it wasn't a sufficient answer. So to follow up, we sent a supplemental letter to the Ethics Commission just saying, hey, you didn't answer the first question, one of the questions we asked, and then they came back with the clarification yesterday.
So they came back with a clarification regarding his review.
Yes.
Are we able to look at that clarification?
I think so, yes. I think I think so. The board members could.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, I think that
I'm trying to make sense.
I don't think it's been released as, and I'm a little uncomfortable talking about it, but, it was brought up, in public. But I'm just saying, I don't think they sometimes release advisory opinions as public documents. I don't believe they've done that with this one yet. But having said that, I think it would be okay and appropriate for the board to see it, internally.
Was it offered to Mrs. Pell to review before this meeting?
Oh, in fact, the School Ethics Commission sent it directly to her.
Okay, so she had the explanation of why
Yes.
she was not.
Yes, that comes directly from the School Ethics Commission to her, and I guess, I think they sent it to me and to her.
I'd just like to interject here. It still does not address the issue from the decision that Mr. Crute wrote in the letter that I can be perceived as violating public trust regardless of whether I have a client in the district or not.
That's not my reading of it.
That was my attorney's reading of it, and that was my reading of it. And if that's the case, then we're focusing on this client, not, yes, I was honest and open about that from the beginning to see if there was a conflict. Again, when they come back and they say anybody in town who is perceived to be monetarily gaining from this should be conflicted, regardless of whether they have a client that is a current employee of the district. So I think we're getting sidetracked and we're not focusing on the first thing. Second thing I do want to address is that if this was done in the best interest of me and to protect me, then when you wrote several supplemental letters indicating my conversations with Mary Ann, detailed dates and time to review what I had said, which some of it wasn't even accurate, and neither one of you even knew. Reach out to you? No, they did not reach out to me, and neither one of you knew specifically. We never reviewed dates and times of corresponding events or any of that, and it was just sent in a letter, and some of it wasn't even true, and not at any point did they confirm or ask me when the client had become a client of mine and when the conflict did exist. So there were some inconsistencies in the letter to the Ethics Commission as well that I tried to address. And again, these inconsistencies could have easily been reviewed, the three of us, to discuss it before we spend taxpayer dollars on this. And again, some of the events in that letter, because you went line by line, date by date, over the course of the last 8-10 months of everything I said, when I said it, that doesn't seem like something that's in my best interest.
Again.
That's all I have to say about it. We can move on now. I think the public knows what they need to know for now, and that's it. We can move on. We can go into new business, and you guys can go in and evaluate the superintendent. I obviously will not be joining.
And I just want to, just one quick thing, just want to remind Ms. Pell that I did in fact talk to her before the letter was submitted to the Ethics Commission, and that she did actually file a reply.
Not the supplemental letter. Not the supplemental letter that went into detail about things I said and that were not necessarily true, and dates and times and specific things. I'm not going to discuss this anymore. The public knows what they need to know. Let's move on with the board meeting. We don't need to end up in any fights or anything. I'm just clearing the record for myself. Yes.
Public trust.
Public trust. Public trust. There's no violation of trust. Absolutely not. I'm extremely ethical. I've been open and honest about this from the beginning, and I do not appreciate being targeted.
Now, I'm going to take 30 seconds. Andy, you have addressed me in front of people and in public, and you've made some serious accusations.
Okay?
I want data to back that up. I want facts to back that up because I want to clear my name.
Why don't we talk about that in private, like we talked about what you adjourned the meeting to talk in private about last meeting? Why don't we do that, Mary Ann?
No, we're going to have this conversation in public. We will not have it tonight because I will give you a chance to prepare what you want to say, and I want to know exactly.
And this is you, I know, Mary Ann. This is you. Okay, when someone disagrees with you, when someone speaks up against you, this is what happens. This is what the whole conversation that was just had with Mary Ann with Catherine Pell was about. Someone disagrees with you. Hey, this board doesn't act like a board. This board acts like a dictatorship because when someone asks a question, you shut them down.
I want to see one fact, Andy, just one.
Mary Ann,
Okay?
look through the minutes. The minutes, they're online, just like you told me, look them up.
So you got nothing. This is a Facebook attack. I got it. Thank you. Okay, any other business?
Is that the best you have?
Is there any other new business? No? Okay.
I have something that I'd like to bring up.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay. I was just wondering, we talk about the chain of command and who to go through for each step, for whether it's a board member or parents or, whatever we're talking about. I was wondering if we could put in for back to school. I know it's not here yet, but it'll be here any, day now. It'll be around.
You're cutting out.
You're cutting out, Melissa.
Is she on mute?
I can't say her.
I can see her. She's talking.
Yeah, there's a little red thing next to her name.
To going straight to the board.
Melissa, hang on. A whole bunch of what you said just disappeared.
We didn't hear any of it.
I'm sorry.
I hate to ask you, but you almost got to start over.
I was
right now.
wondering if with following the proper chain of command,
Nobody wants it. You can text it to.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, but we didn't up until then.
Sorry. I did wish I wasn't virtual. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can she text it to someone?
Yeah, can you text it or something, Melissa? Because we hear it when you ask if we can hear you, but we hear nothing else.
You know what? I can just send something and we can talk about it next time, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, send an email to Chris and ask him to distribute it to the board. Do you hear me? Does it look like she heard me? Because I can't see her.
Sorry.
I said to put it in an email, send it to Chris, and ask him to forward it to the board.
I'll just send an email to everybody.
No, send it to Chris. Don't send it to everybody. Did you hear me? Okay, let me just see. Where are we at? We're going to go into executive session. Did somebody say something?
Do you have another public participation?
Yeah, I guess we should, right? All right, time in our meeting for public participation. Anybody in the public have anything they want to say?
I have another email.
Okay. State your name and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Coffin. I'm a parent in the district. I have a 7th grader and a 3rd grader. And we have a number of parents here tonight, and I just want to get some clarity on agenda item number 8. How many aides we're having going into the 2021-2022 school year? How many full-time? How many part-time? How many personal aides? How many classroom aides? I think there's a lot of confusion on what was voted on and how many we have. I know a number of parents here, I myself, have children who have an IEP and are in need of, an aid of some sort. My son is no longer in need of a one-on-one, but I know of several that are, and some of them are here tonight. So by my count, based on the agenda from the last couple of meetings, it sounds like we have 4 full-time personal aides and 6 part-time personal aides. Is that correct?
No.
What is the actual number? Can somebody give us a number? Because we were trying to figure it out.
Well, 7 full-time aides were just voted on tonight.
7 full-time aides.
Personal versus IEP, I think is what she's looking for.
7. How many of those 7 are personal?
I'm sorry, if you meant specifically personal, then, yeah, it seems to be 4 and 3.
4 personal full-time and 6 part-time personal. Is that correct?
I don't know if the principals are looking at it too. I don't know specifically what each.
Well, in any event, it's probably around 6, 7. It might be a little bit off. If it's not 6, it's probably like 7 or something, right?
If you need the exact count, it was on the last agenda.
Yeah, I know. That's what we were trying to figure out. So it was voted on that we're having this specific number of full-time and part-time folks. My question is really, how do we know that that is going to meet the needs of the students with IEPs this coming year? At the 428 meeting, we projected an enrollment of 254 students. Do we know what percentage has an IEP that requires a personal aid?
Public participation isn't a time where you ask questions and we address. I had Shelley answer those questions. Typically, you just speak, and when it's done, we'll...
Okay, so I'll just speak about it. It's not going to be enough. We're coming into a school year that is going to be unlike any other. We're going to have a significant amount of academic backsliding. We're going to have behavior regression. We're going to have a number of kids who probably have a new IEP to be written. We're going to have a number of kids whose IEPs are going to be changing. And I think we've vastly underestimated the number of personal aides we're going to need to best serve the needs of these students. I think the board should strongly reconsider this part-time business instead of full-time, and I think we should consider possibly adding more aides. I think that the switch for some of these aides from full-time to part-time is very detrimental to the students. I can speak to that from experience. My son had a one-on-one aide full-time for several years. The consistency that provided was invaluable. 1 year, the budget was cut, and it was switched to 2 part-time aides. The difference that we saw in my son was measurable. With the kids that require one-on-one aides, consistency is key. And when you have to switch midday from one person to another, it breaks that consistency. It breaks that security. That aide is part of our support team as parents. And we really need to consider what's best for our kids. There's been so much talk of budgets and numbers and what we're voting on. And what we're really missing here is what's best for the kids that this is really about. And I think the board should really strongly consider, first of all, returning all the aides to full-time and really look at the number of aides we're going to need, because I guarantee there's going to be more IEPs written. Back in the meeting on 5/12, it was said that this number was based on the IEPs maybe back in January, and that we didn't know exactly how many we were going to have. Well, I can tell you there's at least a number of parents here whose kids require it, and that's going to be over the amount of aides that you've already budgeted for. So my point is, I think you should strongly reconsider the numbers and the fact that they're part-time, because it's really detrimental to the kids. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public participation from the audience?
Can we just confirm that I believe we just restored all the aides that were previously full-time to full-time status?
I thought so as well. You said you had an email, Shell?
This email is from Carrie Zimgrodsky. As we approach the end of another challenging school year, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the administration and faculty of both BES and BHS for their dedication to the students and families. I speak as a parent of 4 children. They are in 10th, 8th, 4th, and kindergarten. I have 0 complaints and endless compliments. I have lost count of quarantines. I am currently finishing up what is hopefully our last quarantine of this school year. It has honestly been my most difficult one as a parent. What I've learned over the past 14 months is that our small district managed to provide a safe educational and extracurricular environment that allowed our children to excel despite the obstacles of COVID. Thank you, Belvidere School District.
Thanks, Jill. Anything else? Okay, that'll close public participation. We're going to go into executive session. Can I get a motion and a second to go into executive session?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
It is, we're going to discuss the CSA evaluation. The matters discussed will be disclosed to the public when reasons for confidentiality no longer exist. It is hereby resolved that the board will go into private session to discuss the superintendent evaluation. Any discussion held by the board which need not be remain confidential will be made public as soon as practicable. Minutes of the private session will not be disclosed until the need for confidentiality no longer exists. The board will reconvene in public session at the conclusion of this session. There will be no action taken. So we're probably going to be over an hour. Stay if you want, but we will make no, there'll be no action taken when we come back.